Local business owners play their part in regulating the hemp industry. 23 News reporter Connor Hollingsworth finds out why the industry needs regulation and what could happen if it doesn't pan out.
Back in May, cannabis lobbyists in Springfield tried to sneak in language to an omnibus bill that would ban the sale of hemp products in Illinois by any business that isn't a licensed dispensary. Their argument is that the hemp industry isn't regulated yet in the state, but it would have put a number of responsible owners in our area out of business.
All of a sudden there is a new law that no one's ever seen before, that no one's ever talked about before, that has never been discussed in committee, and it completely destroys the hemp industry.
The tactic of banning non-licensed dispensaries from selling hemp products isn't a new one.
In Virginia, actually, the hemp industry was destroyed by this exact sort of political move.
The problem is certain stores market these unregulated products containing chemicals to kids, tainting the reputation of the plant.
You'll see Delta 8, Delta 9 products that are clearly being marketed to kids. You know, people have Captain Crunch or Count Chocula, and it's Delta 8.
That's why businesses like the Canna Cafe and Buckbee's Wake and Bakery signed a pledge Tuesday to regulate the product, so responsible owners who already regulate themselves can continue to help the community.
I think it's our due diligence to make sure that our product is clean and safe, or else we really are not doing our jobs.
The owners tout the benefits of hemp, saying it can help a variety of people in a variety of ways, but only if it's sold responsibly.
We're responsible hemp business owners, and it's something good to talk about. We want to attract more responsible hemp businesses.
We've got kids between myself and my business partners at 3 different high schools across this town. I care about what happens with my kids. I care about what happens with their friends. And I want the people in this town to know that there's businesses that do care about the other members of this community.
Now, Representative Vella says politicians in Springfield are in the process of drafting up a regulatory framework to make sure hemp is sold safely and sold responsibly at places like Buckbee's and the Canna Cafe.
Hemp regulation gains support on both sides of the local aisle. Representative Vella, Maurice West, and other members of the Black Caucus back it. And on the other side, Representative Joe Cisnowski is also behind it.